Peace and power, freedom and decolonization to all of you African people from wherever you find yourself. And welcome to the Free-Minded Pan-African lecture again, where we discuss today about development. My name is King Kabbalah, a member of the African Continental Unity Party, working in the communication team, and I'm also a member of the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy, which is the academy for future leaders in politics and in business. Now, today's subject, as you already can see, it's about development. Because among other things else that we want to do as leaders in Africa, we want to bring about the most expected thing in the African community, which is development. So we cannot talk about then development unless we're talking about developing roads or calling upon Chinese to come and build roads for us and develop the buildings and the bridge and stuff like that, and they go back and we stay in the same situation. And but that is not what we mean by development, because development is always an inside-out process, is inside-out activity whereby a human being himself must be fully developed so that he can replicate his level of development on the environment and build whatever tools that he deems to be necessary for the progress of his life and for the emancipation and the full potential of his life. So that means we firstly need to develop a human being who in turn will now going to develop whatever that he needs in his environments, because we have been too much in this concept of development whereby we expect other people to come and do for us certain things that we are supposed to do for ourselves. And that has been always negative as far as African reality is concerned. That's why we think for you to be able to participate fully in the efforts that are aiming about bringing change in the society, you should know first of all what is development, by yourself. And most importantly, you should be well aware of the techniques that will help you as a leader, first of all, to get your own development, and then bring now the same techniques into the population to develop people. And after that, people will take care of themselves in terms of whatever they need, where as far as development is concerned. That's why we are here. So we're going to talk about, I'm just going to share my screen with you again so that you can see what we are talking about. Just give me a second. You should be able to see exactly what I'm having here. Now, we are going to talk in this presentation. We will talk about the personal development. You need to, firstly, as a human being, you need to understand what is the personal development, because even when we talk about community development, a community is made of people. You and me, we are part of a community. So now we cannot talk about developing the entire community if we don't firstly focus on each and every individual among our community to see that the conditions of their lives have been improved, right? And by the fact that we individually are developing, it's going to be easier to talk about community development. So we talk about personal development and we talk about community development. And added to that, we can talk a little bit about enterprise development. And as we're moving forward, you'll be able to find out why. So the first thing that you need to know, first of all, is that you as an individual, as a leader, whether in the business sector or in the political area, you are entitled to grow, to develop, to succeed. You are entitled to grow. Growth is part of natural law. Everything in this universe grows. You see, even the entire universe itself, they will tell you that it's expanding constantly every day. So growth is part of the nature. When you drop a seed in the ground and you put the water there, you expect the seed to grow and to become a tree and to feed the people. So growth is part of the nature. So you are entitled to grow in every area of your life. You are supposed to grow and succeed. And what we need to discuss, to realize as African people is that the more we grow and we succeed, we also help other people behind us to grow and succeed. Our family members, our entourage, our friends, and the people that we will happen to meet as we are involved in the activities that we do. These people will benefit from us. But when you don't grow, when you don't succeed, when you don't progress, you don't help anybody, even yourself. You see, in other words, what I'm trying to say that your failure helps nobody, including yourself. But your success helps many people. Therefore, we need to be willing to grow. We need to be willing to deploy ourselves, to expand, and to innovate, to bring forth ideas and things that can eventually give meaning to our life in our society. So now the point is, what is growth? What is development? What is success? These words, sometimes we use them interchangeably, but when you think deeply about them, they actually mean the same thing. Development, success, growth, emancipation. I don't know what else. What does it mean? What comes to your mind when you talk about development, for example? When you talk about personal development, when you talk about personal growth, when you talk about success, what are these things means to you? That's what we are going to find, right? So growth or development means one thing, or success only means overcoming limitations. That is what development means. It's all about overcoming your limitations. Growth is the same thing. Because one thing that we have to understand carefully is that in life, we are facing limitations, whether we like it or not. Limitations are part of life, are part of humans' existence. For instance, there are things that I can do now, things that you cannot do, because you are limited in certain ways or in skills that you need in order to do those things. For example, I cannot tomorrow become a medical doctor because I don't have the expertise. I don't have the qualification to be a medical doctor. And the lack of expertise and the qualification automatically becomes my limitation to what I can do and what I cannot do. You cannot tomorrow become, let's say, for example, an economist or a pilot unless you go through a training that will enlarge your boundaries in that specific field, or that will remove the limitations that you have with regard to that specific field. So you see, growth is all about overcoming these limitations. So you want to become an entrepreneur. What are limitations that are facing you right now and preventing you from becoming a successful entrepreneur? You want to become a greatest of the time, all the time. A great politician of all the time. What are the limitations that you have right now? And only when you discover these limitations and begin working on them, then you realize that there's nothing impossible. It's not impossible for you to become a great politician for your people and help and serve your people from the current conditions of imperialism. So growth is part of nature because limitations are also part of nature. You see, when a baby is born today, the baby cannot automatically talk because his physical structure limits the baby to talk. Is a limitation, right? The baby cannot walk because he is physically limited. So the baby needs to grow. The baby needs to develop physically and mentally so that he can be able now to make a speech, so that he can be able to walk. He can be able to do things that everyone does. Is a part of human being in the society. So you see, growing is actually overcoming the limitations. That is what growth or development means. You need to overcome the limitations so that you can achieve the growth or the development level that you want to achieve, that can enable you to participate fully to the development or to the deployment of the human society in which you have been put to serve. This is very important. So now at least you understand when we talk about development, unless the country develop, we need development in the Congo, we need development in Nigeria, we need development in so forth, so on. What we simply means, we say we need to overcome these limitations of unemployment, limitations of poverty, limitations of malnutrition, limitation of hunger, healthcare. In any area of your existence or any area of that society's existence, there are limitations that must be overcome for what we think of about development as development to take place in our countries. Now, these limitations, you can always find them in two areas. These limitations, whatever you can think of, whether you are limited by knowledge, by money, by I don't know what you may come up with in your mind, you must always look at them as being divided in two areas or in two aspects. So they are what we can call internal limitations, and they are also what we can call external limitations, right? So internal limitations are sometimes referred to self-imposed limitations, or the limitations that we can control, or limitations over which we can influence, we can have an influence, we can control, we can act. And the external limitations sometimes are the limitations that the people or the system, right, or the structure of the society imposes on us, and sometimes we may not have much influence individually over those kind of limitations that are external to our reality. So now it is easy for us as African people to focus on what is being done from the outside world. It's easy for us to think about colonialism, how it has kept Africa under the condition it is today. It's easy for us to blame white supremacy, to blame all these external forces that affect us badly. But I suggest that the best way to begin looking at how to eradicate these limitations is from ourselves. It means the best limitations that we need to begin tackling is or are the internal limitations, because mostly when we work on these internal limitations, we will soon discover that the external condition will begin to put itself in place. It means the external limitations will fall apart by themselves, mostly when we have correctly worked on our own internal limitations. Now, I want to get you through certain limitations from an internal perspective, from your individual life, so that you can begin to work on them and achieve a level of personal development or personal growth that will be necessary for you to be a magnificent and vibrant tool or instrument of social change and life transformation in your society or in any community where you have been put to serve. Now, number one limitation that we have as African people individually is our thoughts. Your thoughts is the first limitation, or let me put it this way. Your thought is the key that you can use yourself, not other person. You can use it to lock yourself in a condition of misery and precarity in which you might be finding yourself today. And the same thoughts is the key that you can use to unlock abundancy in your life, of wealth, of opportunities, of everything that you can think of in life. You know, it's not by mistake that when you look into all the scholars of ancient time, all the philosophers, all the prophets, all the thinkers, it's not by chance that they have, even though you may think they are different, in fact, many of them were different in different ways, but they have all come to one conclusion, one common conclusion. and this is not by mistake. And the conclusion which they came about was a man is just a reflection of his thoughts, right? And this it's actually well written in the Bible, which says, as a man thinks, so is he. So the way you think is the way you become, realistically. So this is to say, the things in which you put your thoughts in, you put your mind in, repeatedly think about those things, become your reality, because our thoughts is actually energy. And the most important thing is that this energy, which we call thoughts, is the energy that is always seeking its physical equivalent. It is energy that always wants to manifest itself in the physical reality. So let's say you hold in your mind negative thoughts about yourself. When it comes to, for example, entrepreneurship, or when it comes to politics, you think about yourself as a person who cannot succeed. So these thoughts, as long as you keep it running in your mind, controlling your mind, controlling your actions, controlling your reality, this will come to manifest itself. And mind you, everything that you see in this world is a product of a thought. Even yourself, you are a result of a thought. You were a thought one day before you become a reality or a person, right? Who you are. So in most cases, of course. So everything in life is a product of a thought. You see, today when you think about some of the successful enterprises or companies or corporations in the world, you can talk about Microsoft, you can talk about Apple, or all these things worth trillions of dollars currently. You see, like for example, Apple is about, I think, 3 trillion US dollars, the last I checked. And if I can ask you, where did this company start from? And you know the answer. In the mind. It didn't start as it was, it started as a thought that somebody had to keep in his mind, hook that thought, browse through that thought, navigate with that thought until it became a reality that we have today, multi-billion industry in the world. So you see, you may have been thinking lightly about yourself while you are sitting with a thought that can change the world, a thought that can change the reality of many African people. How really serious do you take the thought that happens to go through your mind, that crosses through your mind every day? Actually, when you woke up this morning, can you remember the thoughts that you woke up with this morning? Well, when I woke up this morning, the first thing that I thought about is how I can become a useful instrument for my people's liberation and emancipation. What can I do today to inspire the people, to inspire hope in my people, to inspire confidence in my people, and most importantly, to shine a light of freedom and emancipation for my people? So what is the thought that you woke up this morning with? In most cases, you don't even remember the thoughts that you woke up this morning with. But if thoughts are what defines your life, can you see how negligent you can be by not even remembering the thoughts that pass through your mind every day you wake up in the morning? You see, in the building where you are, literally, that building, if I ask you, where was it built from? You may say it was built from the foundation, but the truth of the matter is that the building was built in the mind. It was a thought designed in the mind, and then because it was nourished, it was cultivated, it came into being reality. You see, I sometimes ago wrote a book in which I described a principle that through which a human being is created to function, and I named that principle thought to action principle, or mind to hands principle. So basically it means a human being, every human being is created to firstly engage his mind to create a certain reality that he wants to see in his life before he can get his body to work in making that reality material. But in most cases, as African people, do you know what we do? We rush quickly with we rush with our hands, we rush with our bodies to work on things that have been created already by other people's thoughts, other people's mind. And by doing that, we are mostly make ourselves copycats of other people. For instance, you don't know nothing about marriage, but you see people getting married all around you, and because of that you decide one day, no, I want to get married too. You do that because it's an idea that you got basically on what you saw other people doing, but you don't know what it takes to what it took those people to get to that point of say we want to get married. Maybe they spend 5 years, they spent 6 years in relationship to get to know each other, and you suddenly, because they got married, you jump the next morning want to get married, but you don't know how to handle a woman, or you don't know how to handle a man, and you find yourself in difficulties. You see, in Africa today, we are driven mostly by ambitions, not by vision. A person who sits down and think about his reality, he has a vision. But a person who looks what the Chinese do, what the Americans do, and want to imitate the same thing, has an ambition. An ambition can only take you below the people that you are imitating, because ambition is always based on imitation, or on a certain model that you are following to become like them. And you cannot be equal or better than the person you are imitating. Your best place to be, as you are imitating me, is to become lesser than me, because as you try to reach to me or at my level, I'm also trying to advance. Therefore, you find yourself where I was and I'm no longer there. I'm already better than you, and then you realize, oh, this person has grown, this person has developed, let me try to catch up to him again. You try that again from another level. That is what is happening right now with Africa. We're always trying to catch up with Europe, trying to catch up with America, trying to catch up with Chinese, trying to catch up with Indians. That is why when you see in Africa today, we have everything from other people except ours. We worship everything that is foreign to Africa, then we embrace ours. Whether you talk about religion, you talk about economic system, you talk about education curricula, you talk about the government structure, you talk about the constitution, you talk about the laws, you talk about most of things that we do is to try to be like other people, simply because we have, or we undermine our own capability to think and to create what we want to see in Africa or for our lives. This is real at the collective level, as well as at individual level. You see, so you are created to sit down firstly to think and create your own reality from your mind, and then engage your bodies to work in that reality. Not always to rush firstly with your bodies without thinking about the things in which you want to engage yourself. So your thoughts create your reality. Your thoughts create your reality. And the amazing thing is that we wake up every morning with unlimited power to think about anything we want to think about. Can you imagine that? If your whole reality, your entire reality is made out of your thoughts, right? In most cases. And the thoughts are the forces or the energy available to every human being to use and create the life they want. And you wake up every morning with unlimited power to think about anything you want to think of. You see, there's nobody who comes in the morning, tells you what to think and how to think and what not to think about. This is the power that we have. How often do we use this power? We don't even pay attention to the thoughts that goes through in our mind. So now let me show you, for instance, how we are affected by our thoughts. This through this cycle that I call the cycle of thoughts, belief, and result. So this cycle we have here, what we say, what we see, what is written, self-talk and thoughts. So in reality, your speech and your thoughts are one and the same thing, because your thoughts are your what we can call your unexpressed word. See, when you think, you are using your word that is not expressed for people to hear, or even for yourself to hear. Now, when you talk, right, you are expressing your thoughts. So your words and the thought are the same thing. Speech is just a thought that is being expressed, right? The same way as a thought is a speech that is not spoken out. Now, let's say that you say to yourself, because that is how we design our thoughts. That's how we design our thoughts, through what we say to what we say to ourselves, and also through what we say to our children. That's how we design their thought patterns. Things that we speak to them obviously dictates what's going to be the most dominant thoughts in their life. So let's say when it comes about entrepreneurship, your thoughts is always, I cannot make it. And what you say to yourself every time is that I cannot make it. And that becomes your thought, and that becomes your thought. The more you repeat that to yourself or to your children, now, I'm not good in business, or I'm not good in politics, I'm not good in this or in that, that goes down to become your belief system. Because you have been saying that over and over, it becomes your belief. You see, your mind does not have the capability to know what is true, what is true and what is false. You see, your mind doesn't know that. Your mind does know that. It doesn't know what is true and what is false. Anything that you repeat over and over to yourself and to your mind get captured and swallowed by your subconscious mind and reproduced to you back by the same subconscious mind in a form of a reality. Because as I said from the beginning, your thoughts are the forces that always seek to find its physical equivalent. So if you repeat to yourself, I'm bad at this, I'm not good at business, I'm not good at politics, I'm not good at leadership, that becomes your belief, because it gets swallowed by your subconscious. And that creates now what we call now the self-image. So when you see yourself, the same way that you see in a mirror, we have also an internal mirror, whereby when you close your eyes, you project yourself. You begin to project yourself as a failure when it comes to business leadership, when it comes to political leadership, when it comes to, I don't know, any endeavor that you think you cannot make, or you think you are poor about. So this creates your self-image. And self-image is very important. A person who looks at himself as, well, I'm good at, for example, writing. That is a self-image. You have always said to yourself, I'm good at writing, right? It becomes your belief and becomes your self-image. And it's going to be easier for you to begin even writing, even though you don't have skills about writing, but your self-image is that I'm good at this. So your self-image now, let's say now you have been imprinting in yourself the self-image of a person who is not good at leadership in politics or in business. And one day you happen to find yourself in an opportunity to lead a business or to lead a youth organization for some political purpose. Because your self-image is of a person who cannot do that, the result will be also negative. You won't be able to make it, because what will manifest is the most dominant thoughts that you have been holding for yourself for a long time. And what happened is that when you see the result now negative, because you tried, at least you attempted to lead a business, it failed, and you had prior having a negative image about you as a leader in a business. When it fails, it reinforces the self-talk, and you be like, oh, you see, I'm always saying this myself, I'm not good at these things, these are not made for me. And this reinforces your thoughts, and the cycle continues. And many people find themselves in this situation. They want to grow, but they the image they have about themselves is not that image of growth or development. It's the image of negativity and failure. We want Africa to emerge as a global power base. But what is the image do we have about Africa, and the image do we have about ourselves? Oh, this is a failed project. Nah, in Africa, what we say about ourselves, about Africa will never change. All these countries not gonna change. Not this situation. And that's what you say. What you declare is the energy. That energy will go browse around and then produce the very same result according to what you have been declaring. Because whether we understand it or not, whether we realize it or not, the universe in which we are living is very much alive. The universe is alive, is a gigantic vibration, a gigantic web of vibrating energy that listens, that brings to people what people command to the universe to bring. So things that you say to the universe will always reflect the same picture or the result of things that you have been saying, either about yourself or about your country or about whatever. So now we in this cycle, many people want a better result here. Many people want success here. Many people want to see development. You see, but they don't think about the input. You see, let's say that you have been in this cycle for a long time. You have been saying negative things about yourself, creating self-negative image, and seeing bad results in your life, whether in business or in politics. Now you want to change. So you don't want to change by the results. You don't want to change the result. The first thing that you want to change is the inputs here. What you say to yourself, what you think about yourself when it comes to business leadership or when it comes to political leadership. So you need to begin changing firstly your self-talk, what you're talking about yourself. So if you were saying to yourself that you are a failure when it comes to business leadership, this is now the time you need to change that speech. You need to begin now imprinting a different speech with a different energy, where you have been previously putting on negative energy, talking negatively about yourself, about Africa, about your children, about the family, about African communities and stuff like that, about Black people. This is where you need to begin putting positive energy. If you have been always saying, now Black people are not good at this, I cannot work with the Black people, I cannot trust, the most Black people that will come on your way are only those untrustworthy, those who will betray you. But if you begin now, you want to see yourself surrounded by positive people with positive energy, with connections, stuff like that, you need to change what you say. You need to wake up in the morning, say that I am good at this, to say that I love Africa. Africa is my land, it's beautiful. You need to say positive things. I wake up in the morning, as I said, thinking about myself as a vibrant, revolutionary, Pan-Africanist and life transformer. I think about this every time. I think about this every instance of my life. When I look in myself, I look inwards, and this has become my way of life. So this has become my way of life. It's just a matter of time that I discover myself doing things that I want to do to really be a life transformer for my people. As I said, the only thought that controls my mind every day is how to become to work for the liberation and emancipation of my people. So you need to change what you say to yourself. You need to change your thoughts. The thought will change your belief. Your belief will change your self-image, and the self-image will reflect itself in the result that you want. You see, if that means if you want to have a result of an entrepreneur here, right? You must begin speaking and thinking as one. You don't expect the day that you become an entrepreneur, the day that you build your own business, so that you can begin to talk as one or to think as an entrepreneur. It doesn't work. So your action, your attitudes must always precede your results. So you want to become a politician, begin to talk like one, begin to think like one, begin to believe that you are one, even though in reality you have nothing. You don't have a business, you don't have a company, you are not into politics, you People don't even know you, that you exist, that one day they can elect you. But you need to begin talking as a one. You need to begin thinking like a one. You need to believe that you are one, and you need to create that self-image of yourself as a politician. And by doing this, it's just a matter of time before the result begins to show up that you have been expecting. Before you begin to see yourself doing politics, before you begin to see yourself running your business. So you don't never wait to become a politician before you begin to think like one or to believe like one. You don't have to wait for you to own a business before you begin to think like one or to act like one, to talk like one. So you must understand the result that you want must always be preceded by your attitudes. You must have attitude like one. You must have attitudes like one. You must talk like one. You must act like one before actually you see your opportunity coming for you to lead a business. Because when that happens, you will be well prepared and you won't fail. So thoughts are the forces that control our life. Think about make sure and be careful about what you think every day. It is normal that sometimes here and there negative thoughts can cross your mind. That is natural, but don't let that thoughts keeps the control of your mind. Because you see, the human brain, the human mind actually is like a garden on which you're gonna have to plant some seeds. So it's the same thing like your thoughts. They have to be directed. So you see, if you have a garden on which you don't plant any seed, what's gonna happen? Anything will grow there. Weed will grow there. Scorpions will inhabit. Serpents will inhabit, and it will become a dangerous place for one to live in. It's the same as your mind. If you don't cultivate in your mind positive thoughts about things that you want to achieve in your life, any mind will come through. Any mind will inhabit your mind. Any thought, will inhabit your mind and control your mind and produce the results that you didn't expect. That is why there are people who do things that they didn't even want to do. And they don't even understand why they do things they have been doing. You see? So you need to be able to understand that you are the driver of your own mind. You need to direct your thoughts. You need to put your thoughts, you need to put in your mind the thoughts about things that you want to achieve in life. And by doing that, you will definitely be the driver of your own destiny. It's very important as number one limitation that we have in life individually. We all have this limitation. When we change our mind, when we change our thoughts, we will be able to create the reality that we want about ourselves and about Africa. The mindset of African person today is still a colonial mindset. You still believe that you are not good at anything worthy of its name. Everything good must come from Europe. I understand that is also due to the propaganda, the international propaganda machine, but we need to take charge of our lives and put in our minds the thoughts about things that we want to see in Africa and things that we want to achieve. Do you believe that Africa can change one day? What do you say? If you believe that, then your language every day should be the language of positive energy, right? Instead of the language, that pathetic language that we have sometimes of, oh, Africa never change. Anyway, this is number one key. And number two, the limitation that we have is the knowledge. You see, it is a good thing for you to have a positive mindset. It is a good thing for you to think positively about yourself. But if you don't have enough information, if you don't have enough knowledge about whatever that you want to do, you cannot just do better. Unfortunately, that's a reality. That is why somewhere it is written that my people perish for lack of knowledge. Even though you believe in God, you pray God, you do whatever that you are supposed to do as part of your religion, but if you don't have the necessary knowledge on how to navigate the world, you will die like anybody else who does not have, who does not pray, who does not go to church, right? So knowledge is very important. Let's say that you want to become a business owner. You have positive mindset about yourself. You speak positively about yourself. You have a positive self-image about yourself, right? Now, here comes the question. What do you know about business management? Number one. What do you know about marketing? Because what you want to produce, whether service or products, need to be put in the markets. What do you know about the marketing? What do you know about finance? You see, because as a business owner, at the beginning of your journey, you're going to have at least a certain amount of knowledge in all these areas that are vital for a survival of a business. Because if you have to rely on other people, well, you might get well with it, but in most cases you will end up disappointed, because first you have to pay them, and if your business does not do well, you can imagine. So you want to be a politician. What do you know about the history of Africa? What do you know about imperialism? What do you know about the history of the world? What do you know about politics? What do you know about governance? What do you know about these things? So knowledge is important, and we need to be involved in learning. We are limited because we don't have much information. We don't have much knowledge, right? How many books do you read every day about things that you want to achieve in life? How many books do you read? You see, in the past, we can say that it was normal for people in the past to be enslaved, to be destroyed, to go through everything they've gone through, because knowledge in the past, somewhere, somehow, knowledge was limited, was restricted. For you to be able to know a lot of things, you had to be a kind of a privileged person. For you to be educated in the past, for you to have that luxury of reading a book, actually it was a luxury. You need to be somebody from a particular family. So, but today, right? Today, I think ignorance is just a choice, as I've seen somebody writing it on the internet. Ignorance today is just a choice that we make to remain ignorant. And in most cases, we don't even know that we don't know. That is the dangerous part of it. Many people don't know that they don't know. So with all these things that we have today, all the ebooks, all the internet, all the Googles, all this channel that we can productively utilize to gain as much knowledge as we want to make ourselves better in things that we want to achieve, what do we do? How do we spend most of our times? Most cases, when we go on internet, that's where we see where we spend most of our times. You see all these useless things on media. It's all about music. It's all about women, exposing themselves naked in order to make themselves popular. It's all about dancing. It's about this thing of prank, or is about comedy, or is about sports. But we don't mostly go for those pages or those things that give us knowledge that we want to progress in our lives. You see, most of pages that are unpopular on social media, that have less subscribers, are those that actually talk about science, talk about knowledge. But when you go to those pages that really talk about useless things, you see that they have got millions of followers. It's reality. So you need to embark yourself on that journey to learn as much as you can. Every time that you have, grab a book, read, do some research, make yourself fit in terms of what you want to do in life. So knowledge is an important key, and followed by knowledge is what we call application of knowledge. This is another very important. You see, getting positive mindset is good. Building self-image about yourself, very crucial. Learning about everything that you need to learn about, very positive. But applying knowledge is actually the key point. You see, it mostly said that knowledge is power, but I think more of knowledge being a potential power. It's rather the applied knowledge, which is the power. Because, for instance, everyone knows that it is dangerous, for example, to drive, right, and text at the same time. But how many people find themselves involved in accidents because they were driving and texting at the same time? Many people. You see, that knowledge did not serve you even though you knew it, because you didn't apply it, it didn't protect you from getting involved in an accident. Cigarette, for example, when you buy a cigarette, already it's written on that box that this substance is dangerous to your health. We know, but we don't apply knowledge. We smoke uncontrollably, and we end up having lungs that are polluted by the cigarette because we did not apply the knowledge. So the knowledge will not make a difference in your life until you begin to apply that knowledge. You see, in the 1960s in the Congo, we had about 8 graduates, university graduates, people. And the majority of the remaining people were actually what we can call illiterates. They didn't get a Western university education, education level, as we can put it. But these 8 people, these few people, and the remaining uneducated people, as we can call them in the Western context, they were able to push the boundaries. They were able to enlarge the limitation by overcoming, or by actually pushing the colonialist to think about independence. So these people were able to march, to protest, and to ask for the African independence. But today, how many PhD degrees we have? How many master's degrees we have in the Congo? We have millions of them. Millions of them, the same as Nigeria, the same as Ghana. But what is the significant advancement we have made since we have all these educated people? The answer. You see, if we had fewer educated people in the 60s who were able to do some things, well, at least to get what we call today independence, we would have expected much more advancement today in light of all these education that we are receiving. But when you look the achievement of today, you see that we have been thrown back for another 100 years back from what we were supposed to achieve as free people today, or educated people. So simply because we don't apply the knowledge. Today in Africa, we are getting comfortable in knowing too much but doing so little. All the activities now that we're doing now is all about exhibiting the knowledge, portraying how much we know, telling others how educated we are. I have master's degree in this. I know the history. I know the geography. I know this and that. I know the Kemetic world. I know hieroglyphics. I know all these things. Beautiful. But what do you do as part of your commitment to changing the reality of African people? Every day, what are you doing? And if you do nothing in terms of what you learn, that knowledge will never going to help you. It's only when you begin to apply the knowledge that you'll be able to see the light of freedom that we all want in Africa. So we know that Africa is in the conditions it is today because the Western divided us at the Berlin Conference and destroyed our cultures, destroyed our social institutions, and destroyed everything that was a kind of backbone for African society. We know that. And we know that for Africa to re-emerge again, we need to dismantle all the institutions of the Berlin Conference. We need to undermine the projects of the Berlin Conference in order to create what we call the United States of Africa, or the Federal States of Africa, under one umbrella of leadership, so that we can be able to do better what we are unable to do individually. We know that, but what do we do with that knowledge? Nothing, except doing some symbolisms. Our leaders today are masters of symbolism, mostly symbols that do not have substance. And one biggest symbol actually is the African Union, an institution that have no substantial input in the struggle of African people for liberation and emancipation. We know that, but we pretend that we don't know, right? How can you have an institution that aims to get what we call the African unity, because itself it's called African Union, but within the documents, the framework, or the constitution or the charter, to be precise, of this institution is written that the frontiers, the borders inherited from colonialism are intangible and cannot be changed. This is African Union. How can you make sense of something that is called the African Union, but stating something like that, in the borders inherited by the oppressors, we cannot change them, we cannot question them, we have to embrace them. And thinking about this is an African Union that will develop Africa. No, this is a myth, or it's a circus, as I'm always calling them. They are meeting up there for symbolic satisfaction, to feel like, no, we are united, we are part of it, but we don't do anything. So knowing is good, but doing with what you know is divine, is what will take you to the next level in life, individually or collectively as African people. You know what to do, right? Do it. We always know what to do, but what do we do with that is what makes the difference in our lives, you know? So this is very important, the application of knowledge. And the last point about, not the last point, at least what I've selected, there are a lot of things we can talk about in terms of personal limitations, right? Here, discipline is divine. Discipline is what limits many African people from achieving their targets in life, or from even living their destiny in life, because of lack of discipline. You see, discipline means doing something even when you feel like you don't want to do it. See, sometimes we wake up in the morning, you feel like you don't want to, for example, go to work, you feel like you don't want to go to school, you feel like you don't want to do this and that, you feel like you don't want to go and meet up with the people. But if you are a disciplined person, you will go out of yourself, of your way, do something even if you felt like you didn't want to do it. That is what we call discipline. And discipline is divine. How do we know it? Is because when we look in the universe, the sun is always there every day. It does what it must supposed to do. It doesn't go on strike. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't say that today I don't feel like shining on earth. It's part of the nature. It's divine, because this actually shows the nature or the characteristics of the creation itself, or of the creator, right? So you need to be a disciplined person for you to achieve. You see, you can have all these things. You can have the positive mindset, you can have the knowledge, you can even apply the knowledge. Let's say you begin applying the knowledge today, and tomorrow you don't see the results. The next day you don't see the results. If you are not disciplined enough, you will set back. You will step back and you will abandon, you will give up. But it's only discipline that will keep you moving even when you don't have that feeling of doing it. So discipline goes beyond courage, goes beyond, ambition. You see, the courage is a kind of emotion. It comes up and it can go away. And when the courage goes away, because mostly courage works with some kind of incentives. So you need to get some results that will boost in you the courage to continue to do what you are doing. But when you get disappointment, mostly it is normal and natural for courage to disappear or to diminish in us. But discipline is what keeps us doing the same thing over and over again to get the results that we want. Even in this Pan-Africanism things that we are doing, many people will be there. It's quite interesting. Many people will feel like they want to be part of Pan-Africanism, or they want to do something for Africa only when something bad happens in the world. Let's say, for instance, an African person get mistreated somewhere, or an African leader is killed. That is where you see the social media really polluted with the messages, with the comments, with all these things that we do to protest, to be involved in Pan-Africanism. You see people making speech during the 2020 protest, Black Lives Matter movement in America or in the world as a result of the death of George Floyd. I saw a lot of people in Nigeria, in France, everywhere. Now they were militants, they were now revolutionaries, making speeches, making this kind of declaration. I was like, wow, this is very wonderful. Africa is going to change tomorrow. And as soon as that story went down, that story diminishes. It was no longer part of the everyday news as it was at that moment. those Pan-Africanists, those revolutionaries, they have disappeared. And you must wait for something better to happen again. We'll see them coming back again, talking about how Africa must change and theorizing about everything. But when things are normal, you don't see them. So that is what we call lack of discipline. And you cannot achieve substantial change or results if you lack that discipline. If you in and out, on and off, you come when there's necessity and you go back. No. If you want to succeed, to get to your destiny, you need to build consistently. You need to build consistently, whether things are right or bad. Be there. Speak out if you have to speak. Work if you have to work. Work out if you have to work out. Study if you have to study until you get the result that you want. And mostly because of lack of discipline, we abandon when we were just closer to succeed. That's why we are there. We have been there. Since 2020, we have been there. Even before 2020, we have been there. We've never changed our attitudes. We believe that imperialism works every day to undermine all the efforts of African people and to keep African people under the condition of subjection and the condition of servitude towards other people. So imperialism does not go on holiday. It does not go on vacancy. It doesn't take a break. There are groups of people, groups of think tank groups studying every day on how to keep Africa under the domination of the Western society, because Africa has what the Western society needs for its own survival. So we cannot be those kind of leaders who show up today when things are bad, and when things go back to normal and we disappear, we go back to our normal occupation. Of course, all of us, we have occupation, but we have made a decision. We have taken that discipline to divide our lives to do all these things because they are all important at the same time. We cannot leave the agenda for African revolution behind, and wait for a right moment. There have never been a right moment in life. Anything that you need to do, you need to begin doing it right now. So if it's about your business, you don't have to work harder. And when you start seeing some results and you step back, it's, oh, now I've made some profits today. You go and then spend all the money and you stay at home because you saw some kind of profits. You now begin acting like a boss. You don't want to give much in the business as you used to be from the beginning. That's where you see now a setback. You see, so discipline is divine, is part of nature. You need to be there consistently doing it as the sun is shining upon us to give us life every day, to give us to give life to our vegetations, to the animals that also we eat, and to give us the vitamins and everything that we need. We need to be disciplined. And it takes one step after one step to get to that level. It's not easy to be disciplined, but you need to remind yourself. And we can help you. We have the strategies. We can develop the strategies to help you the same way that we did on ourselves, right? To get to a certain level of discipline at least, right? So we can help you. So that means if you want to go deeper in this chapter of personal development, you will have to obviously engage us, and we will consider a special program where we're obviously gonna go through with you to assist you to get to the level, to get to the level you need to be to see significant results taking place in your life. So this was actually what we had to discuss about personal development. That's very important. It's very important that you understand that these things can only be meaningful to your life if you apply them. Sometimes it's good to listen to these things and feel good, but if you don't do something about them, if you don't aim to change your mind, if you don't aim to learn, if you don't aim to apply the knowledge, if you don't aim to be a disciplined person, your life will never going to change. We want Africa of strong Africans. Rebuilding Africa, as we say, is not about building roads. It's not about building bridges. It's about building men and women strong enough to take care of themselves and to be in charge of their own destiny by doing themselves what other people have been pretending to do for them. So that if that requires to be entrepreneurially minded, you have to we have to do that. We have to build people who will be building strong organizations of business in Africa for its development. If it is about politics, we need to do the same. It's about education, we need to do the same. If it's about science, we need to do the same. I hope this was useful to you. Now let's jump quickly on now what we can call external limitations, because this was just internal limitations. As I said, it's better to focus more on the internal limitations, because those are the limitations that we can control. So if you work out on these limitations that I've just mentioned, right? The thoughts, the knowledge, application of knowledge, and discipline, you will see that from the outside perspective, things will fall apart in most cases. You know, because what limits us from the outside gain the strength from what is already limiting us, from the inside. As a wise man said, it's every entity, every civilization is destroyed from the outside when it is weakened from the inside. Even a bean, you know, it's a bean seed. It's always getting obviously destroyed from an insect that is inside, not from the one that is outside. Now, from the outside, of course, you will face some limitations such as finance, lack of money to fulfill what you want to do. But if you have all the conditions from the inside in place, you definitely, as I said from the beginning, the universe has its own way to make things that are supposed to come together. You will get the finance. I don't know how, but you will get it and fulfill your projects. When it comes, regulation is also part of external limitations. We live in a society that is regulated. There are things that you are supposed to do and things that you are not supposed to do. And every time the law says you must do this, it tells you also you shouldn't be doing this. And you shouldn't be doing this itself. It becomes a limitation, you know, on what we can do and what we cannot do. As I said again, this limitation of regulation is also overcome when you have worked so much from inside. You will see that things are just clear, right? For example, from the regulation perspective, it says that you cannot be a medical doctor unless you have a degree in medical industry. So this is a limitation. But if you work harder from within by educating yourself, by getting to school and study medicine, automatically this regulation cannot limit you. Actually, it protects you now. Now, the number 3, which I think is important, is network. You can build everything. You can overcome all the limitations that we have discussed earlier on from the internal perspective. But let's say that you find yourself isolated, alone. When I'm saying isolated and alone, means you find yourself surrounded by a network of the people who are not having the same mind like you, people who don't have the same dreams that you have. You will get stuck. You will suffer, my friend. And they might even influence you negatively. So we need to choose the network in which we want to be part of. And this should be the networks that can also help us to deploy ourselves in terms of what we want to do. You see, you want to build a business, but all the people around you, there's nobody who is business minded. All of them are just people who are there depending on other people to help them. You cannot progress with your business in that environment. So you need to be surrounded by other business-minded people, because that's where you want to get connection. That's where you can get ideas of how to expand your business. That is where you can even also get the client base. See, network is very important, because whatever product or service that you come up with, it's only people that in your immediate entourage who can serve as the first clients for your product. So if your surrounding, if your entourage is all about people who think southways while you think northways, well, you have a problem there. So network is very important. You need to check who surrounds you and what they think and what are the aims for their lives. So one of the good things about us in a free mind is that whether we talk about business or politics, we have already networks. We have network base. right? So in business, we have what we call Ubuntu Group, which is the business platform that brings a lot of investors together to invest in some specific projects. So this can be an opportunity if you register with us to be part of Ubuntu. You know, this can be a way that you will find yourself in a proper network. So network is a very important limitation from the outside perspective when it comes to individual development. So you always need to question yourself, who surrounds you, and what is the ideal picture in their lives. What do they want to pursue, so that what they want shouldn't become limitation for what you want, you know, as part of your personal development. This being said, I'm going to quickly jump now on what I call community development. Now, it is good that we have discussed the concept of community development. So now you may be wondering, why not do we need to talk about, it's good that we have discussed the concept of personal development. Now you may be wondering, why do we need to talk about community development? Because all these things that I have just explained can work better if other people around you, as I said, are also in the same process. And you see, we are living now in the world that is pushing more the ideology of individualism, which is actually the ideology of the Western society. And we know why the Western people or European people embrace so much ideas of individualism and private property. We know that they are good, they are ready to sacrifice an entire community for the right of one individual to enjoy and to be comfortable. That is why they come in our communities and implant minings there. And after they have exploited everything, they leave the environment polluted. People in that community can no longer do agriculture, which they used to do, because the environment is polluted. And the guy who implanted that mining there got his money and moves away to other areas where he can implant the minings, do the same thing. So this is the philosophy of the Western people, and we know why and we know how. And that will be part of another lecture that we'll discuss as you are a part of our program of education. You will see the lecture of African psyche versus Eurasian psyche. So the concept of community is very important, because for us as African people, our ancestors always considered that the right of community, the collective right, is more important than individual rights. Because actually, for you to be a human being as you are, you needed a community. So this philosophy of individual rights above collective rights is a Western mindset which we cannot ascribe to as African people. You see, the modern human being is born in the central part of Africa, which we call the Uganda or Congo, the Great Lake, precisely. Some 200,000 years ago, that is when the modern human being appeared there. And the first moment that our ancestors appeared there, they had to face the immediate danger of wild animals, which were coming at night and devouring people and killing people. So they had to think how they can survive that challenge or that danger. And what they had to do was to build community. So every night people had to come and live together. And by coming together, it was difficult for the lion, for any beast to come and attack people, right? So you see, community in Africa was a way of survival, was a part of a strategy that our ancestors built in order to survive against all kind of danger. Even in Egypt, you remember the Nile Valley was actually flooding mostly the Egypt. There was floods and destroying livelihoods and all things like that. So people had to think about how to prevent that. They had to organize themselves as communities to manage those events when the flood comes, when the river, go beyond and obviously start entering in the cities. So we need to understand that the notion of community was essential for our ancestors, and it is essential even now, and I'm going to explain to you why. And as I was speaking about managing the danger from animals, our ancestors did not just actually manage to preserve themselves against animals as part of coming together every time at night. They also managed to domesticate some of the animals. That's why you see the concept of totem today in Africa. In the Congo, for example, the etymology of the word Congo, when you look at it in Egyptian or Kemetic language, means the leopard tamers, the people who take a leopard and domesticate it. So we were able not just to defend, to protect ourselves, but also to domesticate the danger that we were facing at that time. And every time when people were together, if an individual moves away from the group, he will get killed, and that was not the problem of the group, and they will never do anything about it, because he puts himself in danger by moving away from the group, because the law is that, okay, we need to dwell together in order to protect ourselves. So by coming together and forming a community, we will be able not just to change certain conditions, that are affecting us today in Africa, but we'll be able to even domesticate the very same conditions. Like, we'll be able to manipulate and to dictate the condition of that reality. By coming together, we are not just going to fight against poverty, but we will be able to dictate the future, as far as poverty is concerned. That's what happened. By coming together, our ancestors didn't just defend themselves, but they also captured the power of this beast, leopard, animals, eagles. All these things we now domesticated by the human being. That's why we need to talk about community development. It's very, very important. In fact, you as a human being, you cannot survive outside of your community. If I have to use Kwame Ture analogy about community, he said that a human being taken out of his community is a most dysfunctional entity or creature than any other species taken out of its own community. And for example, when you take a baby out of human community and put the baby in the jungle in a group of monkey, the baby will act like a monkey. The baby will think like a monkey. The baby will eat what monkeys eat. And before even getting there, the baby might hurt himself because there's nobody to look after him or after him. If he survives, he's gonna be thinking, acting, and doing like monkey and contributing to the monkey's culture. Now, when you take a dog, for example, you put the dog in the monkey's community, the dog is still gonna be thinking like a dog, not like a monkey. It's still gonna barking like a dog. It's still gonna be eating bones like a dog and doing actually everything that a dog does. So it means when you take another species out of its community, it's still gonna function as it's supposed. But when you take a human being out of his community, it dysfunctions. That is why we need to be part of community. You don't have to adopt that capitalist mentality of individualism, rights, and private rights over collective rights, but we need to have that mindset of Ubuntu, of collective. I understand that you can only rise as far as your community rises. Alone, you cannot do anything. You see, the reason why Barack Obama was treated like a monkey, even though he was the president of the United States of America, is because Africa does not represent much. You see, if Africa represented much in the world paradigm, Barack Obama was going to be respected. So you can only go as far as your community goes in terms of respect that you get in the world, in terms of development that you can get in the world, in terms of success that you get in the world. Now, let's talk about what are the limitations that we have as part of community, as African community. We have internally, we have a lot of limitations that that we are well aware of. We can talk about tribalism, we can talk about Afrophobia, this easiness with which an African person will take a liter of fuel and power another African person because he doesn't have his passports, he doesn't have the same ID as him, and burn him to death. This is what destroys internally our community as African community, because we are all part of one community. No matter what the colonialist told you that you are, the reality is we are all part of one community. Jealousy is another limitation internally. The jealousy of when you see your brother progressing, doing something great, instead of supporting him, instead of congratulating him, instead of encouraging him, you become jealous and you suddenly want to do the same thing tomorrow, even though you don't have the skills, the capacity, the knowledge to do that. So you remember what I explained about the individual limitation and competition. You see, we are not supposed to do everything that the Western society does. Competition is the biggest limitation for us as African people. So these are internal limitations that we have that we need to work on in order to obviously get our society, our community as African community where it's supposed to be. Now, let me quickly jump on the external limitation that we are facing as African people, because these are, for me, very important, right? Externally, we have the most important thing that limits our progress as African people are actually the institutions. We talk about the banks, we talk about the corporations. Those are the multinational corporations. We talk about NGOs, these non-governmental organizations that have international status. We talk about multilateral organizations such as the UN, such as the WTO, such as the World Health Organization. These are multilateral organizations. These are the things that limit African development, whether you understand it or not, whether you believe it or not. These are the important limitations. These institutions are the limitations that we have currently. You see, and you must understand that today's world is ruled by private institutions, because most of these institutions are private in most cases. Or if they are not private, they are dictated by private power. The World Bank is a private entity. The IMF, the same thing, right? So these are the institutions that control the world today. They govern all 9 areas of people's activities, where they talk about entertainment, education, economy, labor, law, religion, politics, sex, and war, as it was outlined by Nelly Fuller. All these 9 areas are under the controls of institutions. Now, I'm going to give you, before even I give you an example of how these institutions limits African development, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that none of us as African people controls these institutions. When you talk about the World Bank, is in the hands of European. When you talk about the IMF, is in the hands of European. When you talk about the UN, in the hands of European. When you talk about the World Trade Organization, in the hands of the European. When you talk about the World Health Organization, all institutions of major influence in the world are controlled by other people rather than by Africans. And Africa is being limited because we depend on those institutions. We depend on those institutions controlled by other people, and those other people are the people who have never wanted to see Africa developing. That's a major influence or major limitation that we have collectively as African people. You see, let me give you an example of how these institutions limit the development of Africa. We know that in Africa, we need to fund our agricultural sector to create more food so that an African child cannot go hungry. And for that to happen, we need to build roads so that the food that is being produced can be transported into the marketplace. We need these things. So now in most cases, because we believe more into European institutions that we believe in what we can create for ourselves, our leaders, most cases, they go to what we call the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank in order to borrow money, to do certain things for our development. But now, look, this is a clue. Through what is called the Structural Adjustment Program, which is a neoliberal ideology anyway, these institutions will tell African that we will borrow this money, but this money cannot be used for agriculture. These are the conditions, part of the Structural Adjustment Program. This money cannot be used for the agriculture of your country. So what you need to do, you need to open your agricultural sector to our European companies or corporations to come and do some agro-business projects there for export purpose, not even for the local consumption. That's why you hear that this country has produced lots of food. For example, Cameroon or Ivory Coast has produced a lot of rice. But who consume those rice? You talk about Chinese or European companies producing rice there, the consumption in Europe. They are producing them there because of cheap labor so that they can export them in Europe. But African child is still dying hungry. So these are the conditions that they will tell our leaders. We borrow the money, but this money can only be used by you coming and buying some cars in Europe for your deputies, your parliamentarians, because they need to drive. So we borrow money to buy Japanese or German cars. That means the money leaves those countries and goes back to those countries to buy their products, and you have to pay now that money plus interest, which get to be paid with the blood of the poor people. This is already limitation because there are conditions. You cannot use the money in agriculture. You cannot use that money into boosting the local economy, like to fund the local entrepreneurs. These are the conditions. So if you borrow money to be used in sectors that do not produce benefits, how are you supposed to pay that money? That's the cycle of credit or debts in which we found ourselves today as African people, whereby as we're speaking right now, Ghana is spending 70 to 100% of its revenues to pay external credits than to invest that money for the development of the country. This is a very important limitation that comes through the institutions that Europeans have built for themselves. You see, in 1979, the African head of states went to what was called the Lagos Plan of Development to come up with the strategies on how we can boost the agricultural sector in Africa, and then create more food, create economy, stuff like that. Come up with the beautiful initiatives about the development of Africa. 1 year later, the Western people, white people, Americans, went together to counteract that initiative at what we call the Bretton Woods, the consensus, the Washington Consensus. And the Washington Consensus, that's where come the same thing that I spoke now, the neoliberalism through what we call the Structural Adjustment Program, was to undermine the effort that African head of states had already made at what we call the Lagos Plan for Development. So, and they used the World Bank, the IMF, to implement those strategies, because this African head of state, they were thinking about all these projects because they wanted to go to the World Bank and borrow money. And the moment they got there, they told them, okay, now this is the money, but for us to borrow the money, these are the conditions. Don't open your market for our businesses, our corporations. Number two, you don't have to invest or to use this money to invest in your people. You can use this money to do some useless things. For example, you have to pay your state workers. But when you pay it, it doesn't bring benefits, right? In terms of an investment, you have to pay, for example, teachers, which is good, but it doesn't bring benefits. The money had to be invested first, in initiatives that will bring economic benefits, and from that benefits that we can pay our teachers and stuff like that. So institutions play a very limiting role to the African development. And even your company where you go, look in your country, who owns most of the companies in your country? As I was saying, who owns most of these institutions? Look at the supermarkets in your community. Look at the banks. Look at the, look at the banks. Look at these all businesses. Who own them? African people? No, mostly they're owned by other people. And you have to realize this every time you go to your work, to your job. They tell you how you are supposed to dress. They tell you how you are supposed to speak. They tell you what time you are supposed to eat, how long you're supposed to spend in the toilets, what time you are supposed to. This becomes a culture. So in other words, institutions have the power to dictate the behavior of the people who belong to those institutions. So for the fact that we belong into these institutions, we belong to those institutions controlled by other people, they are able to impose their culture over us and suffocate our own culture. And in return, we pass on that culture to our children without even realizing it, because it is already put at the level of our subconsciousness. So what am I trying to say? We have always wanted to see Africans who love each other, to see Africans who work together, to see Africans who love Africa, to see Africans who do not do corruption, to see Africans who act in certain way that we want to see. But we don't build institutions through which we can now compel that behavior to take place. It is impossible. The one who pays the bill, the one who gives the job, the one who sustains the livelihood is the one who dictates the way, and we are being dictated how to act because we belong to those institutions. That is why it is easy to see African people betraying Africa so easily for the interest of other party, mostly European, Chinese, or whatever. You can see African people even in workplace accusing each other, betraying each other, getting each other fired from work, simply because we don't have the culture, the right culture, the right mindset, because we don't have African institutions through which we can enforce that culture into our people. We want Africa to change. This is how we're going to do, by building our own institutions. How do we overcome the institutional limitation that we are facing now in Africa? Only by building our own institutions. Actually, I think I've said it here. I've already explained about the structural adjustment, the power of institutions. Okay. Before I get to the point of here, what I'm saying is that for us to be able to overcome this limitation of Western institutions that are keeping us in the conditions where we are today, we need to be able to build our own institutions. Without our own institutions, we won't be able to dictate the culture that we want to see in Africa. We won't be able to dictate the destiny of Africa. For example, for the fact that we belong to the World Trade Organization, which is controlled by the Western society, the Western society is able to dictate the price of African commodities. We don't dictate the price of our gold. We don't dictate the price of our coltan. We don't dictate the price of our diamonds. We don't dictate the price of our coltan, all these things that we have in Africa. The price is fixed by the World Trade Organization, which is controlled by Europeans who actually need these resources that we have in Africa. So you see how we are being limited, and what they pay us is actually a 10% of the benefits that they are making out of these natural resources that we have. And in doing so, they are able to create more employment for themselves, and us with that 10%, we do nothing. And when you add corruption on that, our situation is hopeless in Africa. Our young don't have jobs, and the situation is total disaster in Africa as we're speaking right now. So the point is, we can only overcome this type of limitation if we build our own institutions. If we build our own institutions, we build our own banks, we build our own hospitals, we build our own supermarkets, we build our own schools, we build our own African Trade Organization. right? We build our own African health organization. We build our own these institutions to make sure that we are in charge of our own destiny. And we can do this. It's just made of understanding the concept of community, that we need to work together, as I've explained the importance of community. And we need to understand that it is time to move away from this fake individual nationalities that we have inherited from the Western society. That's how you as a leader, you are supposed to think, and you are supposed to inspire your people this kind of change by building our own institutions. Let me give you an example. You see, if you have 100 US dollars alone, it is a money that you can use for a couple of time and it will finish. You can use it to, for example, to buy food for your house, to buy clothes, to buy shoes, buy certain things, and in a while the money will finish. It's just 100 US dollars, is nothing. But if you have the same 100 US dollars in the hands of 1,000 people, it becomes 100,000 US dollars. And that is no longer a simple figure. It's no longer nothing. It is now an investment capital that can really create employments for a group of people in Africa. And we can do that, right? And that is how we can move about building institutions of power on which Africa can depend for its future. It's very simple. It's just a matter of us realizing how the situation of Africa is actually dire at this moment, and begin to do for ourselves what other people have been pretending to do for us. How much money do we spend on buying expensive Mercedes-Benz, buying BMW, buying all these expensive brands? How much do we spend on those things? And I'm always saying that if we can be disciplined enough to say, okay, instead of me buying, for example, 70,000 US dollars car, let me buy a 35,000 or a 40,000 US dollars car and put another 30,000 US dollars together with other 30,000 from other African people. It's going to be a huge investment that we can even use to build our own automobile industry in Africa, to build our own cars, to build rockets, to build spaceships, to build all these things that we need in terms of the world technological society. You see, Africa, when you look at Africa today, it's really it's helpless. We don't have the necessary basic infrastructures or technologies that we need, at least to be competitive in the world of today or before the end of 21st century. But who can do this? The government that is already corrupt? No. We can do this as African community. That is why we talk about community development. Nobody else can come and do this for us. We need to do this ourselves. So let me give you an example. Talking about foreign institutions on which we are depending. Look in our community. Look in your community where you live. You will see that most of supermarkets are controlled by Chinese. Most of supermarkets are controlled either by Arabs. Most of banks are controlled by Indians or other people. How can we overcome this limitation? We must put our money together, build our own supermarkets, and buy from those supermarkets and put the Chinese out of business. It's very simple. We can do this if we decide to do it, and when we realize that only us can do this. You see, so it's about utilizing the means that we have, the resources that we have to do for ourselves, right? And to build our own institutions. Only by building our institutions, we'll be able to protect ourselves, to defend ourselves, and to look into the future. Chinese have their own institutions. They have TikToks, they have WeChat, they don't even care about WhatsApp. They have WeChat, and they give values to those institutions. And by doing that, WhatsApp does not have power in China because they have their own institutions. And we can do the same. Right? We just need to know how to put our money together. The money that we spend every day in alcohol, every time on useless things. If we come through this kind of organizations, we'll understand that there are many ways we can utilize this money even though small as it is, it can do something, because $100 cannot help you to change Africa. But when we put this $100 together from other thousands or millions of African people, we have investment capital that will be necessary to build our own banks, our own hospitals, our own schools, our own automobile industry. Very, very easy. And the reason why we need to look much into building institutions is because institutions, number one, they last longer than the people who build them. Today we know about the Bank of England, we know about the Manhattan banks, we know about the World Bank and stuff like that, but we rarely know about the people who built those banks. We don't know them. This is the power of institutions, and mostly those people have died. They left those institutions to their children left them to their grandchildren, and it goes on. That's what we call generational wealth. Why do we always want to see the final achievement of our initiatives when we are alive? Why can't we have that mindset that we can begin something today that will be continued by our children and our grandchildren and so on, to sustain ourselves in long term? So institutions have the power to live longer than yourself. So if you are always been there wanting to do things by yourself, wanting to be the only one who wins, the only one who is there, you will die and you will leave no legacy. But if we decide to be part of that projects that will aim at building institutions that Africa wants or Africa needs, we will be participating in the long-lasting, successful projects for Africa, because those institutions will live longer than us, and our ideas will continue to work through those institutions even after we have gone, right? This is the first important of the institutions. And the number two is that institutions dictate the behavior of the people who belong there, and I've already explained that. Number three is that they are tools for social engineering. Through institutions, we can change the society by dictating how people who belong to those institutions must behave, must speak. That's why you have today what you call formal language and non-formal language. Where do you get those words? Because when you are in your workplace, you have a formal code of dress, formal language, the way of talking formally. We can also come up with our own ways by building institutions that people who belong to those institutions must behave. It's very important. Very important. Now, you as a leader, your aim is to bring some change in your community. There's no best way to bring this change there's no better way to bring this change in your community only by involving the people or your community in those projects of change which they need. And this is what we've just discussed here, which is about community development. So you need to think about it and involve your community in this process of development. That's how we lead our community politically or business-wise. We need to mobilize our people in putting the money together to invest in the sectors that are important in our local communities. If we want want to have an industry that produces braids for our community, we need to put our money together and build that. It will be a business-owned business. It will be, a community-owned business through which we feel proud and we feel participative in the process of our own development. And this is the change that we want in Africa. Why? Because now it is no longer time for expecting one single charismatic leader to come and serve Africa. It's not going to come. He's not going to come. It is now time that we as a community seize our matter in hands and do with them what we want to do with them for the results that we want. That is why we want this, what we call participative development, which we call community development. I hope to stop here for maybe questions and answers, and I hope that this has been more clear. I've tried at the best of my ability to make this simpler and understandable when it comes to personal development and collective development as African community, I've discussed the limitations that we are facing individually, internal or external limitations. I've discussed the limitations that we are facing collectively as African people, internal as well as external limitations. And most importantly, I have discussed how and what we can do to overcome these limitations. Now it is up to us as African people to recoup our courage and engage ourselves in this process that will bring about liberation and emancipation of Africa. The best way for you to begin this is to be part of an organization that is working about creating the change in Africa. Alone, you cannot do anything. It's only when you are part of an organization that you will be now exposed to a certain ways of acting collectively as a community and bring about change. But it also requires that you work on yourself, you work on your knowledge, you work on your mindset, you work on the application of the knowledge, you work on the discipline. There are a lot of things that you can work on yourself as an individual so that you can really productively contribute to what we all together must do as a community in order to bring change in our lives. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your attention. As a reminder, this lecture is produced by the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy and sponsored by the African Continental Unity Party. If you feel that this knowledge that we have shared here is very important to the reconstruction of Africa, please, we plead with you to support us, to sponsor, to donate to the Free-Minded, to sponsor us, to donate, to do anything that you can do to help us advance or grow forward, because our aim is to create leaders fit for business leadership as well as political leadership for the future of Africa. As always, we say that education is the preparation of a future generation, and the people who are curious about the future, they must begin investing in the manufacturing or in the industry that manufactures the children or the brain of their children. And this is what we do now. So you donating to the Free-Minded, you are directly investing in the industry that will manufacture the brain of our children, so that we have tomorrow leaders who are not corrupt as we have them today, but leaders who understand what Africa represents to us and what we must do and what way we must go for the better future that we all have been hoping for, but which we're never going to come by hope, only will come by hard work and by commitment in doing what other people have been pretending to do for us. Right? Now, they are basic to end. I want to give you basic institutions that we need in Africa in order to overcome the limitations that we are facing currently. The number one is agricultural institutions to produce our own food, because the one who feeds you, the one who controls your life. Today, we are being fed by Chinese, by Arabs, by Indians with plastics, things that are devastating to our health. We need to really promote, or to how can I put it, to subsidize to our agricultural industry. You know, we need to think about it. Agriculture is very important to produce our own food. Supermarkets are very important to market our products and to provide for our people. Banks in order to invest in our people. Schools in order to educate our future generations, and hospitals in order to cure our own diseases. These 5 institutions are vital to any existing society, and every society that aims to exist in the future must really manage these institutions. We cannot leave them in the hands of our oppressors or in the hands of foreigners, because they don't have our interest at heart. We need to invest in these institutions and to control these institutions by ourselves. So by doing this, we will be able to largely limit the external limitation of our dependency to other people's institutions. And in closing, I will close with this quote by our greatest Pan-Africanist, Marcus Garvey, when he said that change has never yet satisfied the hope of a suffering people. Africa is suffering right now. African people, we are suffering right now from white supremacy, from imperialism, from racism, from any kind of isms you can think about. We are badly affected and we are suffering. But Marcus Garvey said, change will never satisfy the hope of a suffering people. We hope that we will one day recover from this suffering. Of course, that is a good thing, but we will never going to recover by chance or by a kind of a miraculous event that happened and our suffering comes to an end. That will never going to happen. We only going to make an end or put an end to this suffering by hard work, by dedication, and by discipline. So everything that I've explained right now, for these things to be meaningful to our life, we need hard work, dedication, and discipline. We need to work hard for Africa as a whole. We need to work hard. So it's not just matter of you donating $100 to an organization, say, oh, no, I've worked already, it doesn't work. No, we need to work hard. We need to be consistent. We need to be there. We need to follow up. We need to do market research. We need to study those institutions, the structure that we want to build for those institutions, because they have to succeed, because they are businesses. So in a nutshell, not by chance, not by prayer, not by hope alone, but by hard work that will produce the power that will change our reality. Thank you very much. Peace and power, freedom and decolonization. See you again.